Hi everyone, it's Katrina. History is much more connected than we realize. Join me as we uncover the mysterious connections that bind our past together. What are the gods holding in their handbags? Why are there identical petroglyphs in Sweden and in Georgia? And did the ancient Chinese really arrive in Peru thousands of years ago? Keep watching to find out the answers to all of these questions and more. What's up with these handbags? Why are so many gods holding these mysterious handbags? These handbags are prevalent in ancient carvings all over the globe. They appear in the ruins of temples in Turkey. They've been seen in the artwork of New Zealand's native Maori. Even the Olmecs of Mesoamerica use these symbols. The most famous handbag symbols can be found in Iraq, in the remnants of the ancient Sumerian Empire. I mean, we call them handbags, but the truth is that nobody knows what exactly they are. They look like little purses and are typically seen in the left hands of gods. Maybe they're buckets, but they do really look like handbags. They started to appear around the end of the Ice Age. Once you start noticing them, it's hard to look at old temple carvings and sanctuary paintings without seeing them. But what do they mean? That's where researchers start to disagree. Some believe the handbags are representations of the cosmos. The strap of the bag is the hemisphere of the sky. The square base is the planet. This isn't too far-fetched of an idea because ancient cultures from Africa to China did associate the circle with the concept of spirituality. The square was also typically associated with the earth and the material world. The two symbols joined together sometimes represent the unification of earth and sky, or the unification of the spiritual with the material. But why do the gods have these objects? And how can they not be handbags? I mean, look at this image of an Assyrian relief carving found at Nimrud circa 883 BC. You can see the detail is fantastic. I mean, the image shows what appears to be an eagle-headed Anunnaki god with angel wings. Every detail is immaculate, down to it look like fasteners on the handbag where the strap is attached. Scholars want to say it's a cosmic mystery, but it looks like an ordinary handbag. It's weird no matter which way you slice it. One of the earliest handbag motifs in the world is at the ruins of Göbekli Tepe, a place you might be tired of hearing me talk about by now. For those just tuning into the channel, we love talking about Göbekli Tepe around here. Göbekli Tepe is considered the oldest temple in the world by a wide margin. It dates to roughly 11,000 BC. Its original purpose, unknown. The fact that handbag motifs were found at the site proves that the images come from the very dawn of human civilization. Definitely before handbags were a thing. If you don't believe me, look for yourself. This is Pillar 43 from Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, picture thanks to Alistair Coombs. Look at the top of the pillar at the trio of handbags carved there. Below the handbags are creatures that look kind of like scorpions or maybe bird-headed gods. All of this was carved more than 6,000 years before the pyramids of Giza. Tell me how the same handbags at Göbekli Tepe and Nimrud were discovered in Mesoamerican ruins attributed to the Olmec around 1200 BC. This is an Olmec monument recovered at the ruined city of La Venta in Tabasco, showing a man wearing what looks like a space helmet holding a handbag. As far as scientists are concerned, there is no logical explanation. So what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Swedish petroglyphs in Georgia. How did a series of petroglyphs from the Bronze Age end up in both Sweden and Georgia? Not Georgia as in the Central Asian countries snuggled underneath Russia, but Georgia as in the American state. I start the investigation on Ven Island, the epicenter of a mighty Bronze Age civilization in Scandinavia. The island is located in Sweden in the Öresund Channel. The island is covered in mesmerizing petroglyphs. The strange thing about these petroglyphs is that they look very similar to the sacred symbols that the Creek Indians carved into boulders hundreds of years ago. This symbol is specific and hard to miss, and appears in more than just Georgia and Scandinavia. It's been spotted in Mexico as well. It's known as the sacred fire symbol, sometimes called the sun wheel. It was sacred to the Uchi and Creek peoples just like the cross is sacred to Christians, or like how the Ankh was sacred to the ancient Egyptians. The sacred fire can be found across northern Europe, carved into stone in Sweden and Denmark. It's also been found etched into the ruins of Palenque in Mexico's Chiapas state. To the Maya, this symbol was the royal sun glyph. It looked exactly the same as the sacred fire drawn by the Creek Indians and the sun wheel carved by Bronze Age Europeans. There must be a connection, right? There is if you look hard enough. In North Georgia, there are at least 12 stone-walled agricultural terrace complexes just like the ones used by the Maya and their highlands. Then there are monuments like the Tougaloo Stone, a humongous chunk of igneous rock that's been sitting in Toccoa, Georgia for about 230 years. Before that, the stone was half a mile away at the edge of the Tougaloo River, where it may have been used as a sort of trail marker for explorers coming up from the Savannah River. Coming up from where, you ask? The Tougaloo Stone is covered in petroglyphs that look suspiciously like Bronze Age European ships. They look like Hjortspring boats, which are also carved on stones in Sweden. Picture long Viking ships with dragon figureheads and rows of paddlers. There are also astronomical symbols on the Tougaloo Stone, suggestive of excellent navigational skills. Could Bronze Age Europeans have made it to America and established a trading network with the natives there? 20th century archaeologist Joseph Caldwell claimed Tougaloo began as a very important Creek Indian town centuries ago. It thrived until around 1700, when it was allegedly sacked and burned by a group of Cherokee. The ancient people of Tougaloo may have traded with Europeans long before Christopher Columbus ever arrived. Now let's look at some petroglyphs on a rock face in Nyköping, Sweden, not far from the coast of the Baltic Sea. The glyphs carved into this rock look nearly identical to the early Maya glyphs from about 2000 BC. Many of the same symbols appear in the track rock petroglyphs in the Georgia mountain. The ones in Georgia date to around 1200 BC. The petroglyphs are carved images of the sacred fire symbol, or the sun wheel. The same symbols appear at all of these different sites, but they were carved over a period of more than 1,000 years. How do you explain that? Or can you explain it? If you can, you better leave a comment for me to find later. Did you know that southeast of downtown Savannah is a cluster of mounds that date around 5,500 years ago? Some of them are newer, dating to around 2300 BC. But the oldest, dated by Louisiana archaeologist William C. Haag, is the Bilbo Mound from 3545 BC. Some experts think that the Bilbo Mound is the oldest architecture in North America. What does all of this mean when looked at together? Do you think all of these different cultures could be connected? Let me know in the comments. And now for number 8. But first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Eric Forsyth and Jamie Toby for supporting this channel. Thanks so much, guys! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. The oldest pyramid in the world. The oldest pyramid in the world was built 7,500 years ago in a place you're not going to expect. Right away, let me assure you the pyramid is not in Egypt. It's in Iran, located within Kashan City, a place that locals claim is haunted. Up until 1930, nobody knew Sialk Hills existed. The whole archaeological zone was buried. Then came the flood, soaking the region to the bone. Sediments and surface soil were washed away, revealing the earliest known pyramid on the planet. Yes, there are pyramids that are supposedly older. I've talked recently about the pyramid in Bosnia that's allegedly more than 34,000 years old. And there's another one in Indonesia that I've talked about on the channel. Gunung Padang has been called the oldest building in the world. The pyramid in the jungle supposedly built 25,000 years ago. These other pyramids are more theoretical. They might exist, but scientists can't agree. Scientists do agree on Sialk Hills, though. You can see it with your own eyes. Its existence is not up for debate. But if the pyramid is so old, why have governments and archaeologists been ignoring it? European archaeologist Dr. Grishman from the Louvre Museum was the first one to excavate the site. His findings were published in a pair of books, and then they were forgotten. Up until 2001, the Iranian government pretended like the pyramid didn't even exist. In the last few years, artifacts unearthed after the flood have been turning up in places like the British Museum and New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art. Only now is the scientific community taking a genuine interest in the place. That doesn't seem fair when they've been obsessed over the pyramids of Giza since before the days of Napoleon Bonaparte. The rectangular stepped pyramid is known as a ziggurat. It's believed to have been built by a civilization you don't hear much about these days. They were called the Elamites. the first true pyramid builders. They built 4 major ziggurats, including Sialk Hills. The others are Haft Tepe, the Susa Ziggurat, and Choka Zambil. The other 3 are more contemporary with the Egyptian pyramids, but Sialk is the oldest. It predates even the Ziggurat of Ur, which some scholars think was the Tower of Babel from the Bible. The Ziggurat of Ur was built in 2050 BC. Archaeologists think the Sialk Ziggurat was built between 5500 and 2900 BC. There's a small issue with the dating because evidence shows the settlement in Sialk is definitely 7,500 years old. Yet it's not clear precisely when the first stones of the ziggurat were laid. Either way, it's ancient. If it isn't the oldest confirmed pyramid on the planet, it's up there close to the top. But what I want to know is why the Elamites built their pyramids. I'd also like to know why the Egyptians, Indonesians, Maya, Aztec, and the mound builders of Mississippi built their pyramids. Where did they all get the idea from? Let me know what you think in the comments. Bosnia meets Mesopotamia. There is evidence of a connection between an ancient European tribe and a mighty power in Mesopotamia. The stone walls I'm about to show you are almost indistinguishable from the walls of megaliths in places like Greece, Peru, and other unrelated locations. In Bosnia stands the ancient capital of the Illyrian tribe known as the Daorsi. The city is conveniently called Daorsun. I say it stands, but there isn't much left now. The capital has been reduced to a few barely surviving walls. Yet the walls that do stand are impressive enough that you're going to want to check them out on your next trip to Europe. Trust me on that one. The Daorsi culture was around for about 250 years, living peacefully along the valley of the Neretva River. They appeared in 300 BC, traded with early Greeks, and signed a peace treaty with Rome in 168 BC that allowed them to mint their own money. Although they were small, they didn't mess around. Their city of Daorsun started with a central fort and some walls and expanded from there. The walls were practically unbreakable. They were made with huge stone blocks, just like how the ancient Greeks did it. The main defensive wall extended almost 200 feet, was more than 12 feet wide, and stood 30 feet tall in some places. The Daorsi were amazing builders. Just check out this picture of one of the few walls still standing. Look at how the blocks fit perfectly together, forming a formidable barricade. They remind me of the walls at mysterious Peruvian sites like Sacsayhuaman, which are equally as mystifying. There are rumors that the Daorsi weren't the only ones who built the walls. I just talked about the Bosnian pyramid a few minutes ago. Bosnian-American researcher Samir Osmanagic says it's 34,000 years old. Well, the idea behind the pyramid is that it was built by a sophisticated civilization far older than the Illyrians. The Cyclopean walls of Daorsun could be remnants of that older civilization. The walls are similar in construction to megaliths found in Mesopotamia. It makes you wonder if perhaps there wasn't one mega civilization responsible for building most of the megaliths I talk about on the channel. The Japanese Stone of Mystery. Speaking of megaliths, let's take a trip to Japan. They say Japan is the next Egypt. The East Asian country has mounds, ruins, and monoliths to give the ancient kingdoms of the Mediterranean a run for their money. It also has one very curious megalithic stone called Masuda no Iwafune. This thing is bizarre. It is not your typical standing stone. It's not really a mound, it isn't a temple or a shrine or a statue. It's hard to describe other than by saying it looks like it was made by machine. The contours and surfaces are so perfect that it looks like a large chunk of concrete formed in a modern factory. But it's definitely not modern. The monument is in the middle of a forested area in the hills of Asuka in Nara Prefecture, surrounded by bamboo trees. It doesn't get less modern than the Japanese countryside. Asuka dates to roughly 250 AD and is home to unusual stone carvings, although none of them can even remotely compare to Masuda no Iwafune, especially because nobody knows who built it or when. It has no date attached to it, so it could be 2,000 years old or 15,000 years old. There isn't any culture that the monument is linked to. There is nothing similar like it in all of Japan. Honestly, I want to say it looks sort of like an upside-down ship made from concrete, but it clearly isn't. It has huge square holes and weighs somewhere around 800 tons. That's right, 800! That's the weight of practically 200 elephants. The holes were likely used for holding something, but nobody can say what. It doesn't make any sense that the stone moved at all because it's simply too heavy. Do you have any thoughts about the stone or what it could be? Let me know in the comments below. Yom Kippur and the Alien Pharaoh. There is a secret connection between the holiest day in the Jewish calendar and an ancient pharaoh who may have been an alien. A religious tradition followed by millions may have gotten its start in ancient Egypt with the worst king in that nation's history. The holiest day in the Jewish faith is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. 10 days after the Jewish New Year of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur is a day of confession, forgiveness, and repentance. It's celebrated by Jewish people praying in synagogues, confessing their sins, and beseeching the forgiveness of God. The first mention of Yom Kippur in history is in the Torah, in Leviticus. Moses commands the Israelites to obey the Day of Atonement to be cleansed of their sins. This was done by not working, not eating, and sacrificing an animal or two at the tabernacle of Moses. Things changed a little bit in the year 70 thanks to the Romans. The Roman army showed up in Jerusalem and destroyed the Second Temple. That was around the time that Jewish people stopped offering sacrifices and instead offered up prayers. I don't know about you, but prayers feel a little less terrifying than blood sacrifice. But how did it all start? Scholars believe the tradition emerged around the 8th century BC. However, there are a handful of more open-minded scholars who think Yom Kippur started 600 centuries earlier in ancient Egypt. The thing of the matter is, Moses may have been an Egyptian pharaoh named Akhenaten, ruling over the land of the Nile in the 14th century BC. The Bible might be lying about Moses, his origin, and the whole origin of Judaism. Have you ever heard of the Book of Life? It's a common Jewish belief. They say that a person is inscribed into God's Book of Life on Rosh Hashanah. This idea can easily be traced back to the resurrectionists of ancient Egypt. They had something called the Book of the Dead, which contained spells to help a person achieve eternal life after death. During the New Kingdom period of Egypt, those who could afford it were buried with some version of the Book of the Dead. This book contained their name, along with helpful instructions for how to navigate the realm of eternal life. The idea was slightly modified during the creation of Judaism. Instead of everyone having a magic book, only God had one, and he treated it like Santa's list, putting everyone's name down. God decided each person's fate on Yom Kippur. The Book of the Dead ensured each Egyptian soul's judgment. It's possible that something big happened that transformed the Egyptian Book of the Dead into the Book of Life. It almost definitely had something to do with King Akhenaten, real name Amenhotep IV. He took power in Egypt in 1352, and he was not a popular fellow. But could Akhenaten have been the real Moses? Keep watching to find out. The real Moses. 5 years into his reign, Pharaoh Akhenaten abandoned his royal residence in Thebes and disassembled the Egyptian religion. He was a wrecking ball, trying to dethrone the gods his own people had been worshipping for centuries. Akhenaten, who looked like an alien with an elongated head and oddly proportioned body, built a new royal residence and a new capital. Then he tried to force everyone to worship a single god that they had never heard of before. He's been called the first monotheist in the world. In other words, he was the first ruler to support the worship of a single supreme deity instead of many deities. Donald B. Redford excavated some of Akhenaten's earliest temples in Karnak. He described how Akhenaten initiated the cult of the sun disk. He incited a war between the good god Aten and the rest of the Egyptian gods. You know how in the Bible there is God and then there are the false idols? God wants everyone to worship him and stop worshiping pagan deities like Baal, Molech, and Dagon. That was sort of Akhenaten's thing. His god was Aten, and all the other deities were his god's sworn enemies. The rest of Egypt hated this. After Akhenaten was gone, his son Tutankhamun took the throne and undid everything that his father had done with Aten. This is where the connection between Yom Kippur and ancient Egypt can be found. Scholars believe Akhenaten's solar disk cult wasn't obliterated. It didn't end when he left the throne. Akhenaten himself may have survived. He may have taken a group of followers with him, fleeing across the Red Sea to Israel. Is this starting to sound familiar to you? Moses may have either been Akhenaten or one of his loyal apostles. The biblical story about the Israelites fleeing Egypt, the evil Pharaoh, parting the Red Sea, the 10 plagues, traveling to the Promised Land, that might be what really happened. Only Moses was an Egyptian pharaoh who looked like an alien and venerated a sun disk. This makes an astonishing amount of sense when you think about it. So many Egyptian customs appear in altered forms in Judaism, like Yom Kippur. For example, part of the Yom Kippur liturgy involves the Yizkor. The Yizkor is when people light a special candle that burns for 26 hours as a way to honor their deceased family members. It's meant as a renewal of strength between the living and the dead. Ancient Egyptians did the same thing by lighting lamps and incense. One of the most important things for the Egyptians was to be remembered, so family members frequently visited the tombs of their ancestors and lit lamps. It's unlikely Jewish scholars will ever admit this connection exists. If what I'm saying is true, it means Judaism was an offshoot of an obscure Egyptian religion. Then Christianity was an offshoot of Judaism 1,000 years later. Persian mummies found in Siberia. Almost a dozen mysterious mummies have been found at a remote site near the Arctic Circle known as the End of the Earth. What makes the mummies so mysterious is that although they were found in Russia, they appear to be Persian. The mummies are several thousand miles away from where scientists would expect them to be. The remote site is known as Zelenyi Yar. A decade ago, archaeologists discovered 34 shallow graves here. The graves yielded 11 mummified corpses, which date to about 800 years ago. Excavations came to a halt when local indigenous groups complained that the archaeologists were disturbing the souls of their ancestors. To be respectful, the excavation stopped, but now it's started up again. Researcher Alexander Pilipenko at the Institute of Cytology and Genetics is leading a new wave of research. The mummified remains are amazing, but they weren't mummified on purpose. This was accidental preservation, the bodies remaining so intact because of a combination of copper and cold. The mummies were dressed in copper, with copper masks placed over their faces. They were buried amidst a hoard of jewelry and relics. And when I say dressed in copper, I mean 5 of them were covered head to toe in copper, like they took a bath in it. Another weird aspect is that all of their skulls were found either shattered or not found at all. The mummies were also dressed in a Cruella de Vil-style wardrobe of beaver, wolverine, bear, and reindeer fur. Natalia Fyodorova at the Russian Academy of Sciences has come up with a few ideas to help explain the mystery. The skulls being smashed may have been part of a religious ritual. It may have been done immediately after death to protect the souls of the departed from evil spells. The feet of the deceased were also pointed at the nearby river, which likely had some religious significance too. But why were they from Persia? That's the crazy part nobody can figure out. In the graves, archaeologists found bronze bowls that originated 3,700 miles away in Persia. When you think of people like King Xerxes, you don't think about the Arctic Circle. So how did the Persians get to the far north of Russia, and why? Archaeologists think they were part of a culturally diverse group who migrated along trading routes to the top of the world. I should also mention that the whole skull-smashing thing has been connected to the vampire graves of Bulgaria, so there is a lot going on here. Ancient link between Chinese and Peruvian civilizations. There are a lot of similarities between the Chinese and Peruvian civilizations. Too many similarities for there not to have been some contact in ancient times. But who went where? Did the Chinese sail across the ocean to South America? Or was it a triumphant feat of seafaring pulled off by the Chavin culture in 1000 BC? One of the biggest newspapers in Peru recently ran a story that shocked every person who read it. The newspaper El Comercio suggested a link between the Shang dynasty of China and the Chavin culture. Both existed 3,000 years ago, though on opposite sides of the globe. The piece focused on renowned Chinese archaeologist Tang Jigen. Tang believed that he would be able to prove a connection between China and Peru using DNA technology. Tang's theory is that when the Shang dynasty collapsed, Prince Yin left China and fled east with the remnants of his army. The prince was hoping to start a fresh existence somewhere new, somewhere as far away as possible. His journey led him across the ocean to Peru, where he came into contact with the Chavin. It's an interesting theory, but one that lacks hard evidence. Tang Jigen hasn't been able to come up with the proof that he wants. He hasn't gotten enough cooperation between labs in the US, archaeologists in Peru, and his own colleagues in China to get the DNA test done. But he has pointed to similarities in the iconography of the different cultures as potential evidence. There are uncanny similarities between Shang artwork and Chavin artwork. Even the later work of the Mochica, Nazca, and Paracas, all cultures of Peru, have similar styles. It's possible the Shang dynasty arrived in Peru and flexed such influence that they inspired the next 3,000 years of art. Or they at least mixed enough of Chinese culture with the South Americans to become deeply ingrained in their traditions. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. The Great Recycling of Gods. What if human beings have been worshipping hand-me-down gods and goddesses since the beginning of time? Like the goddesses of Venus, the ancient female deities who all seem to be connected to the planet Venus, almost as if our ancestors were trying to tell us something. Anahita is an ancient Iranian goddess. She's a divinity of water associated with wisdom, fertility, and healing. The Greeks and the Romans called her Anaitis. In Sanskrit, the goddess of the healing waters was named Sarasvati. Only there were a lot of versions of the Venus deity. The Greeks had the goddess of love and beauty, Aphrodite. She was known as Venus to the Romans. There was also Tanit, Inanna, Frigg, and Astarte. Then there was Quetzalcoatl and Lucifer. These were all deities of the planet Venus, from Mesoamerica to the Bible. All of these gods and goddesses are connected. The very first temple to Venus appeared in Rome in 295 BC. In Virgil's legendary poem Aeneid, Venus is called the evening star because it's so bright and visible in the night sky. Lucifer is also sometimes called the evening star. Why? Because Lucifer was named after Venus and after the dozens of gods and goddesses that came in earlier mythologies. Are you familiar with the story of Adonis? Maybe you've heard someone refer to a good-looking hunk as Adonis. Most people don't realize Adonis was the son of Aphrodite in Greek myth. Adonis was born under some seriously disturbing circumstances. Aphrodite became jealous when King Cinyras of Cyprus had a daughter even more beautiful than she was. The king's daughter was Smyrna. To seek vengeance against the girl, Aphrodite cast a spell on her so that she would fall in love with her own father. Pretty disturbing, right? Smyrna became pregnant, and her father tried to kill her when he realized he'd been bamboozled. When King Cinyras hit her with his sword, Aphrodite turned Smyrna into a tree. The tree was sliced in half, and out fell Adonis. These Greek myths aren't really for children. The reason I'm telling you about Adonis is that some scholars have noticed a connection between him and Jesus Christ. Adonis is the master of cameos. He shows up in the mythology of Assyria, Phoenicia, Greece, all over the place. He is often portrayed as a shepherd. He died and was resurrected. In Athens 2,000 years ago, there was a festival dedicated to Adonis celebrated on, can you guess what day? That's right, Easter. Adonis and Aphrodite were both worshipped in one of the few Roman mystery cults that modern scientists know about. It was called the Sabazian Mysteries. During this festival, revelers would drink wine, mourn death, and celebrate resurrection. It's believed that Jesus of Bethlehem was a rededication of the Adonis story, a story that likely originated with Dumuzi and Inanna. Do you see where I'm going with this yet? I'm running in circles on purpose because I'm trying to get the point across that the gods of humanity have been recycled and reused repeatedly. The tale of Christ is like the tale of Adonis in many ways. Their feast days were the same, their days of birth and resurrection were the same. Yet Adonis likely came from the story of Dumuzid, also called Tammuz. Dumuzid was an Akkadian god of shepherds worshipped in Mesopotamia long before Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. His sister, also his wife, was Inanna, also called Ishtar. Ishtar was an earlier version of the Roman goddess Venus, aka Aphrodite, who was Adonis's mother, and also fell in love with her own son. Do you see how this all seems connected? Dumuzid's sister was different in Sumerian mythology. Her name was Geshtinana, goddess of agriculture, fertility, and dream interpretation. The most exciting part, though, and I think you're really going to love this, is that Dumuzid appears on the Sumerian king list. He is listed as an antediluvian king who ruled the city of Bad Tibira. The Sumerians believed Dumuzid was a living god who came from the heavens to rule over humanity for centuries as a mortal king. What do you think of the long line of shepherd gods and fertility goddesses, and the fact that they seem so closely connected? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let me know what other videos you'd like to see in the comments.
The lizard men. Most of us are familiar with the theories about a secret reptilian race living underneath our very feet, pulling the global strings from their secret lairs. And while it may seem like nonsense, some strange figurines discovered at the archaeological site of Al-Ubaid suggest otherwise. 7,000 years ago, the Sumerians carved a series of bizarre statues in the form of lizard people. This is no exaggeration. They look like any other statues carved by an ancient civilization, except that from the chest up, they are clearly reptilian. One of the statues even shows a female lizard human with a little hybrid baby held in the crook of her arm. Is this proof that we are all ruled by alien overlords from a planet of reptilians? Of course not, but it is confusing, especially since scientists have never been able to solve the mystery of the Ubaid lizard men. Excavations first started at the site in 1919. Archaeologist Harry Reginald Howell was the one to first come across the figures, which left him in utter disbelief. They were created by the Ubaid culture of southern Mesopotamia in the earliest days of human civilization. This was when the first villages started cropping up and when people began irrigating the farmland. It may not be a coincidence that people started building houses at the same time they were allegedly visited by highly advanced reptilians. What do you think? Let me know your theories in the comments below. The Babylonian Map of the World. The Babylonian Map of the World is one of the oldest ever drawn. It was created in ancient Mesopotamia around the year 700 BC in what is now southern Iraq. It's not a map like you might think of one, not drawn on a piece of paper. Instead, the map of the world as the Babylonians knew it was inscribed on a clay tablet. It's amazing because it shows just how small the Babylonians really thought the world was. The top half of the map is a circle showing places like Assyria and Elam. There are also some mysterious places that appear to be cities, some of which archaeologists haven't been able to identify. The center of the map, the area of Mesopotamia, is ringed by what they called Salt Sea. But the big mystery is that the Babylonians marked regions unknown to science. The map shows lands and islands and the distance between them and Babylon. Along with each region is written a small description on the map in cuneiform. The text describes strange and outlandish beasts that can't possibly be real. They also describe the heroes who lived in these faraway places, though they are completely unheard of to historians. There is a major debate surrounding this map. Some historians believe it was one of the first serious examples of ancient geography. Other historians believe the actual purpose of the map was to show the Babylonian mythological world. In other words, it may have been a map representing different places and people in Babylonian myth, not the real map. We just don't know. Lost Egyptian Labyrinth. The Lost Egyptian Labyrinth of Hawara is a mystery that goes back 2,000 years. Archaeologists originally uncovered what they thought to be the remains of a mysterious labyrinth decades ago at the foot of the Pyramid of Hawara. Before the discovery, this labyrinth was thought to be a structure only spoken of in myth. The pyramid was built by the last great ruler of the 12th dynasty, Amenemhat III. It's also believed to be the pharaoh's final resting place, though his mummy has never been discovered. There was another pyramid built for the daughter of the pharaoh, Neferu-Ta, located about a mile away. But adjacent to the main pyramid is the mystery I'm here to tell you about. The giant mortuary temple, which we know definitely existed, may have also formed a complex system of buildings, galleries, and passages. This honeycomb structure could very well have been more spectacular than the Great Labyrinth of Crete in Greek myth, except real. The issue is that archaeologists don't know if there really was a labyrinth. They have found ruins, but it's unclear how extensive they are. The labyrinth would have been entirely underground, built from nothing but mud and brick. And because of this, much of it has probably already collapsed and is beyond recovery. The only other proof we have comes from the Greek historian Herodotus. He visited the city 2,000 years ago and described an underground complex of caverns and chambers beyond anything he could imagine. What do you think? Did the Egyptians have a labyrinth? Let me know in the comments below. The Astronaut of Cadiz. The Astronaut of Cadiz is one of the strangest artifacts that we know almost nothing about. It's a stone slab that allegedly dates back to the days of Rome, but perhaps even earlier. It was found embedded in the wall of a cemetery in the small Spanish village called Cazar. The slab is an unsolved mystery because archaeologists can't agree on where the stone came from or who made it. But I assure you it is real. It is currently on display at a museum in Spain. The giant stone slab shows what appears to be either an alien or a warrior. It's definitely a strange figure, with the body of a person but a head that looks more like a mushroom. There is an inscription carved into the body of the figure, composed of a mishmash of different languages. The writing is in Latin characters, but the language is a bizarre mix of Lusitanian, Tartessian, and Basque. These are all ancient Indo-European languages. Some say the figure is meant to represent a Celt-Iberian warrior from the 1st century BC. Others say it's supposed to be an astronaut. They say the mushroom-shaped head is actually a space helmet, and that the curious figure is a visitor from another planet. What do you think? Is the mushroom-shaped head meant to represent an astronaut, or simply some kind of warrior's helmet? Maybe something else. Let me know in the comments. The soldier that teleported. In October of 1593, a soldier by the name of Gil Perez teleported 8,000 miles. At least that's how the story goes. Gil was a soldier in the Spanish Empire. He was guarding the palace of the governor in Manila in the Philippines. At this point in history, the Philippines had already been under the control of the Spanish since 1565, but the 7th governor of the territory, Dasmariñas, was executed by Chinese rowers who mutinied against him on his boat. This event threw Manila into a bit of chaos, but even with the governor dead, the palace still had to be guarded. Gil began to get dizzy and sleepy during his shift. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, he was 8,800 miles away. He had teleported to Mexico City. He was questioned by some guards in strange uniforms he didn't recognize. They thought he was a deserter from the Spanish army and threw him in a prison cell. But here's the thing that's really interesting. Gil told his captors about the assassination in Manila. Because of the huge distance between Mexico City and the Philippines, news of the governor's death hadn't arrived yet. Everyone thought this guy was crazy. But then, months later, a ship arrived in Mexico with news of the governor's death. This man knew months before anyone in North America could have possibly been aware. This story could just be a story, but there are historical records of the event. A Spanish clergyman and historian named Gaspar de San Agustin wrote of the account in 1698. He believed the soldier had used witchcraft to transport himself. The Newton Stone. The Newton Stone was found in Aberdeenshire, Scotland in 1804. A local earl named George Hamilton Gordon found a stone when a new road opened up near a farm. Local shepherds told him of a monument rising out from the grass. The stone was removed from its original site and planted in a garden in Newton House. This was 220 years ago, give or take a few years. It should come as no surprise that archaeological wonders were uprooted and put in the gardens of rich people's estates. Because of this, nobody knows if the indecipherable inscription on the stone was added after it was moved or before it was found. The stone today has 2 inscriptions on it. The first is written in ancient Ogham script. Ogham is an alphabet from the medieval days that was used to write in the Irish language. There are only about 400 surviving inscriptions of Ogham in the entire world. This particular one seems to be nothing but a list of names of unknown people. The second inscription is written in a language that nobody has ever been able to identify. People have tried deciphering it for over a century, but nobody can figure it out. Some have suggested Phoenician, but we don't know for sure. It's become so frustrating that many experts believe the second inscription was a prank carved into the stone long after it was already found. What do you think is written on this mysterious Scottish stone? Let me know any theories you have in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe before you leave. We've got lots more videos coming up. The Mummy of the Maiherpri. The tomb of the mummy Maiherpri was found by Victor Loret in the year 1899. It was found next to the tomb of Pharaoh Amenhotep II. The unsolved mystery is that nobody knows who he is or why he was given a tomb next to somebody as important as a pharaoh. Research shows that the individual died in his early 20s, but no cause of death has ever been found. He was also identified as Nubian from the south of Egypt. Based on his proximity to the pharaoh and the great variety of treasure in his tomb, he was definitely important during the 18th dynasty. His mummy was in great condition except for a little bit of skin missing from his feet. He was still adorned in heaps of jewelry, his cartonnage mask still resting on his face. His name is a little curious too. Maiherpri translates roughly to the lion of the battlefield. He also had two titles, child of the nursery and fan bearer on the right side of the king. These long, complicated names only makes things more mysterious. Archaeologists think he may have grown up in the royal nursery, perhaps as a son to one of the pharaoh's less important wives or one of his concubines. Humans in the Catskills. Strange formations in the Catskills may be proof of an ancient civilization. The huge rock formations can be found along the edges of a hiking trail on Overlook Mountain in Woodstock. There are several of them along the sides of the mountain, but it remains unclear where they came from. Mainstream archaeologists haven't even bothered to excavate or investigate them. The rock formations still stand just as they have for hundreds of years. Glenn Kreisberg, an amateur archaeologist, believes he knows where the formations came from. He believes them to be the remains of a tribal civilization that lived in the Catskills before Europeans ever took the land for themselves. He has identified 19 of these sites in the Catskills, each one a huge pile of stones that looks like an ancient burial cairn. But he's found more than just formations. He's also discovered stone effigies of snakes, rock chambers, and huge walls that are mostly broken apart. Glenn says that whoever lived here was just as advanced as the Mayans or ancient Britons. And while that's doubtful, it is clear that some culture did live in these mountains. We just don't know who or how advanced their civilization really was. The tunnels of Baya. The old city of Baya can be found today in the Italian region of Campania. It was once a seaside resort visited by the wealthiest inhabitants of Rome. Imagine the most exclusive beach resort in the world. That was Baya 2,000 years ago. It was notorious for parties, lewd activities, and hedonistic patrons. But as the centuries went by, volcanic activity caused the ancient resort town to be sunk under the water. Today, the entire location is submerged. But there is one mystery about Baya that remains unsolved. In 1932, Italian archaeologist Amedeo Mauri discovered the entrance to a hidden tunnel. This tunnel led into a cave that may have been constructed to mimic the Greek underworld. While walking through the darkness of the tunnels, one needed to cross an underground stream of sulfur water that could have easily represented the river Styx. This was the legendary river that every newly deceased person had to travel to reach Hades, the name of both the underworld and its patron god. On the other side of the stream, archaeologists found a landing stage. This probably would have been where visitors docked their boats. Beyond this was a stairway to a hidden sanctuary. Completing the journey from the tunnel's entrance into the sanctuary would have felt like walking into the underworld. But what's crazy is that there are no historical records of this place existing. There is a story about a prophetess living in a nearby cave. But other than that, there are no clues as to what this cave was used for. It may have been a way to trick people into believing they had crossed over into the underworld. It may have been used for dark ceremonial rituals. We just have no idea. It's a total mystery. Swiss watch in a Chinese tomb. A Swiss watch about a century old was discovered in a tomb that was sealed 400 years ago. Nobody is quite sure how it happened, and it's become a huge mystery in the archaeological community. The grave dates back to the Ming Dynasty in southern China. When archaeologists opened the tomb, they found a miniature watch inside with a marking that says Swiss. The hands of the clock had stopped at approximately 10:06 a.m., crusted solid with mud and dirt. Clearly the watch had been in there for some time. But it makes no sense for a few reasons. First of all, people in the Ming Dynasty 400 years ago didn't wear watches. Second of all, there was no country of Switzerland back then. The rest of the tomb seemed perfectly normal. This was the only artifact out of place. The discovery was made back in 2008, and researchers still haven't been able to put together how the watch ended up in the tomb. How do you think it happened? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon for more awesome videos.